Welcome to Directionally Correct, a People's podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guests, Kristin Cullen-Lester and Greg Pryor, editors of the Social Capital Imperative.
Hey, Directionally Correct fans. If you're looking to stay connected to the podcast, make sure to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, watch our videos on YouTube, or listen to the podcast on your app of choice. This podcast is dedicated to you to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. We are a listener-supported podcast, so please consider becoming a patron. If you'd like to support the podcast by becoming a patron, you can find a link to sign up in the show notes or at patron.podbean.com/directionallycorrect. Thanks for being a listener. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
Well, I was thinking about your fire rescue service, and there's actually a network analysis function called keep layers. So the idea is if you have, say, 5 fire stations you can have in a town, you wouldn't put them all in the center of town. There's no coverage there. So using this function, you can actually spread it out across the network and identify different people who would have greater coverage across the network.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting, again, not that it will necessarily come up, but I thought if I was just because I think about these things is when we move to town, it's an amazing network to get connected to all the networks in town. So this group of people is uniquely central connectors in all the the head of the buildings and grounds for the church, and people who I meet are it's the center of the network. So anyway, it's given me it's a great. We moved here about 2 years ago. It's a great way to get connected with people in town, and actually multiple. And then you get people of all ages uniquely, right? So people have been in town forever, and then you've got we've got a bunch of high school cadets who are in the high school here, and so the Chris Ernst would be proud that it's boundary spanning connections.
Well, I mean, you're a central node yourself, but I love small town networks. I'll visit my parents' towns. Oh yeah, that's the mayor of town / the superintendent / the fire chief, right? But is that human capital or is that social capital?
Well, and can I build on this? Because I've been wondering, what is the difference between human capital and social capital? And what's the difference between social network analysis and organizational network analysis? And I knew that this crew of 3 people outside of me could answer that better than anyone else in the world. So have at it, guys.
Diving right in. Like it.
So I'll give you my quick view on social capital versus human capital. And then again, then you get the real expert. So I should not be the one to lead, but then you'll get the smarter, reflective answers. When I think about it, Cole, I think about the notion of, human capital or the personal capabilities, the personal knowledge, the personal experiences, those resources that we have individually that we can unlock, that we're storing, right, from a pure capital perspective. The social capital are the same idea of these resources, but they're relational resources. And what my friend Kristin always reminds me is they have to be unlockable. They have to be leverageable. So if I have a million likes on Facebook, which I don't, I'm not as cool as Scotty on that, but they have to sort of be leverageable for some outcome. So it's the parallel universe. I've got these human capital resources, right? My skills, my experience, my energy, my health. And then I've got locked value or value locked up in relationships that I've been nurturing that I can unlock over time that allow me to innovate, to execute, and thrive, sort of unlocking what I know through who I know. I'll stop there. That's the best answer I've been able to, coalesce in my time thinking about this.
Yeah, and I think it's a great answer. I wouldn't really add anything to the human capital, social capital distinction. And it was one of the reasons why, not to jump right into the book, but one of the reasons why I think we were asked to, put together this book for PSYOP was because historically, IO psychologists have been so focused on unlocking the potential of human capital and the development of human capital. And all of our focus has gone there. And we've been slower and I wouldn't say resistant, maybe a little resistant to really dive into how do we, actually develop social capital and utilize social capital within organizations. And think that comes maybe more from like our psychological training and background and focusing like intra-individual often in what we're doing. So yeah, and then social network analysis versus organizational network analysis. My view is that we're doing social network analysis, the analysis of, I mean, really whatever we're focused on people, I guess, in social network analysis, right? But like, and the relationships among them, and it's happening within an organizational context. That's what makes it ONA. So nothing too,
I totally agree. I don't even use the term O&A anymore at
yeah.
all.
I,
How
I
did
was going to ask.
you two get together? Like I knew Greg before Cole introduced me to Kristin. And this is how the network works, and I don't understand how
Yep.
it works, because it's like you see two people away. How'd y'all get together? Did Cole introduce y'all?
No, Cole, we met like at NCIOP, right? North Carolina. I
Yeah,
was
this
the
was like
college.
15 years ago.
A long
Wow.
time
That
ago.
was back when you were at CCL, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So we hosted that event one year at the CCL campus in Greensboro. And so Cole and I got the chance to meet there. And then, yeah, it was a network connection though, because so Greg and I were introduced by our mutual good friend, Phil Wilburn. So, and Phil and I met at CCL. We're coworkers there and then started working together on various like networks projects and things. And both went our ways, separate ways after our time at the center, but stayed good friends and colleagues, and we founded the network leader, company together and everything. But so all that to say, when SIOP approached me to think about putting together this book, they're like, "This is great. We really would love for you to do something on networks. I think it's really important, but you're too academic. You need a practitioner partner." And I was like, "I think I'm like fairly practical in terms of what I do and how I spend my time, my impact." But Phil said, who you should work with is my good friend Greg, and so he introduced us. And
Now, in full disclosure, amongst friends here, Kristin, the initial view that SIOP wanted you to have Phil as your partner, he said he was too busy. And he said, but I know a guy who's
no
not so
guy,
busy. I know a guy who's not so busy. It's a way downgrade from the power of our friend Phil. But it was my blessing. It was my blessing that I got to. And what was amazing, I mean, I think Kristin, we were saying the other day is we had, other than Phil,
yeah,
we had almost no intersection in our network. I mean, it was
Wow.
we really bridged these two different worlds. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks ago, after having worked together for 4 years, that we actually even met in person. I thought we had met in person. Kristin reminded me at the SIOP at the book launch. She's like, "I hope I can get there because we've never met in person." I said, "No, we have." And she's like, "No, we haven't."
That's so wild. Well,
crazy.
that's interesting. I mean, I was at the book launch, and congratulations on the book. What's interesting? Well, for actually, kind of to your point, Kristin, about being an academic. So you're a professor, I believe, at Ole Miss, but you have this thing called the network leader. I'm not actually sure what that is. And then Greg, you're at Connected Commons, which I'm also not exactly sure what that is. Could you guys kind of explain those organizations? Are they nonprofits? Do you have like a product that you sell? Like what are they, and are they related to network analysis?
Sure, I can start first. So yeah, Network Leader is a company that, again, Phil Wilburn and I started. Largely, we our product is the Leader Network Diagnostic, which is an assessment tool that professionals can take to get feedback on their network, to identify its strengths, to identify opportunities for further development. And so it is a network analysis assessment. It would be what we would refer to as an ego network assessment. So it's looking at like your own professional connections, who you're connected to, the characteristics of those individuals, how they're interconnected, and then giving you feedback on, again, like, do you have the network that we know from decades and decades of research that is predictive of success, right? Or of various other important outcomes related to well-being, et cetera. So that's like what we're really about at Network Leader, is taking all of that science and trying to make it accessible and easy for people to apply in development of their own professional network. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
The
And
Lord's
I would
work,
say, because
really.
I'm not connected to it, it is an amazing tool. It is a crazy powerful way for people to very simply, very consumably understand their network. It can be an absolute game changer. I can say that because I'm not part of the company. I'm just a fan. I'm a big fanboy of it. So I'll give you a call if it's all right. And I don't want to go on for too long. You can kick me under the virtual table or edit me out here, but I'll give you my sort of what I call my origin story to social network analysis in general. And it connects to the connected commons. I had been at Juniper Networks back in the day. Juniper being a networking company, its leaders and organization leaders had a natural affinity toward understanding networks and the power of networks. And our two people were there at that time. Chris Ernst, who we know from our CCL days, and obviously a huge and big Chris Ernst friend and fan, and Courtney Harrison. And what the group decided was that it was at a really unique time in the company's history that understanding the network and a particular issue that the company was facing, a really important imperative the company was facing, that we would do a network analysis of a group of people who were critical really to the company's success. And we got introduced at that time through Courtney and through Chris to our good friend Rob Cross. Rob is one of the central figures, an absolute pioneer in this space. And I had what I would refer to as my Dorothy Wizard of Oz moment with Rob. And Kristin has heard me talk about this in the past. But I was a human capital guy. I grew up, my dad was a human capital person. My sisters are human capital people. Like, I grew up with a human capital lens only. And then all of a sudden, I had a moment that my Dorothy moment where I saw the world in that moment in The Wizard of Oz where they go from black and white to Technicolor. This vivid Technicolor moment when she lands in Oz. And I had that moment when Rob came in and helped us, and Deb helped us do this network analysis and showed us all of these amazing things that we had been missing, all of this invisible context that we had been missing. And for me, it was that Dorothy moment. I then saw the world in both human capital and social capital at the same time, how they complemented one another and how they really reinforced those ideas. And that's in that moment, I was hooked and, raised my hand to support Rob and Michael Arena and Chris Ernst and a whole bunch of others who then founded the Connected Commons, which is a consortium of professors and practitioners who really elevate the role of social capital in the world. And so we continue to just sort of be a curator of people doing research, providing experiences and context. And it's just been an amazing opportunity for me to continue to go deep in this context.
Are we going to get a live Connected Commons event? I used to love them when they were, pre-pandemic, when they were going on. They were great.
We would love to. Michael and I have been talking about that and talking with Rob about it. We were at a recent conference not too long ago with our friend Cole, and people were saying, "Listen, we want to get the band back together again." Scotty, to your point, it's still such an emerging idea, and I think people really received a lot of benefit from one, connecting with this community and having reinforcement. I think they felt a little bit like they were sort of these outliers or out on islands, and they got together with people who said, I'm seeing similar things, I'm seeing value. And that it was a tremendous, I think, support network to help people not only get access to these ideas, but also just feel like there was a community seeing around corners on this. So that would be fun. I'd love to do that.
I think that's the value of the book, right? The social capital imperative, and it's a beast. It's a big, thick book with lots of information. I'll say chapter 3 is the best. That's what I'm gonna say.
No bias, yeah.
Like what? We talked about like what inspired it. Like PSYOP obviously wanted to develop a book like this because it's to get at the social capital aspects. But how did you select authors? What sort of content did you want to go into it to really convey to folks?
Yeah, I think first the vision for the book was to be a practical resource for people who are actually wanting to use, adopt a social capital lens to make a real impact within an organization. And so when Greg and I were talking about doing this, we were like, there's so many amazing resources available for how to do network analysis, right? Like you can skill up in that. There's commercial software offerings that are really great. There's all these different resources that people can use, but yet there's still a challenge to then take that into the organization and conduct a project where you're going to use network analysis and be able to get those insights and then actually communicate them in a way and come up with actions to create impact. And so that was really the bridge we wanted to try to help build more with this book. And so like we know we needed like foundational aspects or chapters like the one that you wrote that's, helpful to like introduce people to a variety of different network metrics, or like how do you approach designing a survey or other ways of collecting data, even what kinds of data could you possibly analyze using network methods, like all of those kinds of questions. But then we wanted to shift to have two focuses with the rest of the chapters in the book. One being a set of review chapters where we recruited pretty much academics that have been working in a particular area, where it's like human resource management or teams or innovation or leadership. We picked 9 kind of areas that were basically your common go-to areas where you would have application, and ask them to take a look at all of the research that's been published and distill it for a practical audience, right? So that people could have a resource to basically understand, like, what do we know about the types of networks that matter for these kinds of outcomes, and like, basically what's the science telling us about how we would develop them or utilize them. And then we wanted to try to bring the actual practice of network development and network analysis to life with case studies. And so the rest of the chapters in the book are case studies where we have an amazing group of practitioners that share their experiences, some very smooth, some a little rocky, along the way, and shared, the different challenges that they faced. And Greg always described it, or started describing it, as like, we wanted to kind of be like the HGTV for network analysis, with like giving people, like a show, or like a sense of, different stories. People have gone before, right, and tried to do a project, and what did they experience, and how did they do it, and what were the outcomes, and missteps along the way, and that kind of thing.
We sort of adopted this idea of a beacon and a blueprint, sort of both inspiration and information on how to do this. Scotty, again, back to the comment on the commons, like, for a lot of people, these are new ideas. And so that's what, I loved about our HGTV, which really resonated for people. It's like, your backyard isn't exactly the same as the one we're looking at, or what, your kitchen isn't going to be the same. But sometimes we're looking for that both that inspiration of, I can do this, and a bit of information of, hey, here are things that, that must go right and can't go wrong in the order of operation. And that seemed to be something that really resonated with folks. I think, for me, a big part of the book was this idea, just personally, that I hope, and I believe we're into this sort of second generation of network analysis, social network analysis, organization network analysis. And we've got just amazing work for more than a decade, decades of the Ron Burts, the Rob Crosses, the Dan Brass, the, amazing people who have done an incredible jobs of the arts and the charts and the algorithms. The Scotty Hines of the world love Chapter 3. And that's an incredible foundation, Scotty. And my hope is that the next generation is then looking at the business outcomes and looking through that lens sort of back and pulling that forward and saying, how do we improve workforce well-being? How do we enable leadership effectiveness? So Chris and I very much took a sort of outside-in view. We have some amazing foundational chapters, yours very much included in that. But the idea was sort of framing it in ways that when we talk about this, what would be the organizational outcomes? What are then the sort of insights and the actions, and threading those 3 ideas together using Kristin's brilliant frame of what do we want to reveal, develop, and leverage within these networks. So I hope, and I believe our 50 amazing authors. We actually had 50 authors who contributed to the book that gets moved around with a forklift in my house, because it is actually that monstrous.
It's a massive book. Yeah,
it is a massive book, but it costs a ton to FedEx to friends. I've discovered I had to take out a loan. I'm like, really? Could FedEx cost that much to send its book? Don't I get the book rate? They're like, no, you don't. Yeah. But I do hope that this next generation of helping people look at the outcomes as you guys do and say, okay, how do I now use these resources? How do I use these tools? How do I use these really important analytics and algorithms and arts and charts to help me unlock those things that I saw when I was first at Juniper Networks? And again, this whole hidden group of things. And I think our 50 authors did an amazing job, 50 contributors, in helping do that.
Well, I've now heard from multiple people that one of those 50 authors was the best and chapter 3 was the best. Scott, tell us, what was chapter 3 about? And can you kind of give us your perspective on this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So chapter 3 was really kind of an overview of the various network centrality metrics, how to conduct various sources of data, as Kristen mentioned, and like some minor use cases around. And like I think Greg was hitting on something sort of interesting there. Like a lot of folks, when they start out with network analysis, they generate a network and they may calculate some centrality or something like that, like degree, and they like kind of throw their hands up in the air, like, "Whoa, what am I supposed to do with that?" It takes a little bit of creativity, a little bit of ideas, and you need this sort of inspiration that is woven throughout the book. It's really, really good. They gave me advanced copies of all the chapters, and I was like, oh my God, like kid in the candy store, read about it. But it takes a little bit of imagination to actually apply these sort of things. That it's like one step beyond normal, human capital data. We'll go there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys saw it a second ago, but Kristen, I don't even know if you remember this, but you were actually the person who introduced me to the concept of social network analysis. When we met, you told me to buy this book, Social Network Analysis,
The
Methods and
Bible.
Applications. And you can actually see I still have a bookmark in there that I made about 3/4 of the way through. So I never quite finished it. But
It's really impressive you. Yeah.
because it's another thick book that costs a lot to FedEx. But I'll say, how does the book, The Social Capital Imperative, compare to something like this, a more methodological book? And what would make it, desirable to the folks that are maybe not familiar with social network or social capital, and why, like, what's interesting? How are you bringing people into the fold?
Yeah, I think our book, it serves a different purpose, right? So, like the Wasserman and Faust book that you have there is like the kind of go-to reference of like all of these different metrics and like conceptually what do they mean, and so we're not trying to replicate or replace that. Scotty's chapter, does a great job of kind of giving us the highlights of some of these like really important key metrics and things, but not going to have the depth of a whole book for that purpose. And I think ours is more, again, kind of making the connections to like, what are the outcomes that matter of these networks, right? So like, if you're struggling or not even struggling with, but you're thinking about like designing HR systems within your organization, like even thinking about and realizing that the choices that you make in designing those systems are going to influence how relationships are developed and utilized within your organization. And so maybe making some like intentional choices with regards to that, or thinking about if you're a leader and you have a team that you want to maximize the effectiveness of, focusing not only on the relationships within the team but then also how you're connected externally and what do you need to be thinking about, right? So within each of these areas, just trying to give people like the practical connection to like, why does this matter day to day within organizations? And then, like, if you decide, right, that you want to do a network analysis and everything, you've got a good jumping off point with some of the initial foundational chapters to like kind of skill up. But then also, there's lots of resources that are pointed to where you can go deeper and learn more, like that book that you were showcasing. Yeah.
Do any of these use cases like stand out to you? Like things that were like actually surprising, or things that were exceptionally instructive, insightful?
Greg, what do you? I know you have favorites.
Yeah, no, I definitely have favorites. I want to be very cautious since we do have 50. But I will geek out on it for a second, Scotty. Though, to your point, what I really appreciated, one of the many things I appreciate about what our contributors provided forward, was the incredible diversity of context. So I'll pick one which I was just absolutely fascinated by. We had a case study that Lauren Blackwell wrote from NASA. And the context for her story is literally an Italian astronaut on the International Space Station who is literally drowning in space due to a water leak in his helmet. And they looked back at that from a team systems perspective, as only NASA can do doing a postmortem on this astronaut's life who needed to be saved to get back inside the International Space Station, and found that it was a human dynamic that underlined not a human capital, but really a social capital element in how something was misinterpreted, and the complexity on that hand of putting people into space and the complexity of team systems and the risks involved in that. So that I just found that as such an fascinating, extreme case. We have the amazing story from our friends at Johnson & Johnson who talk about what was happening during COVID in their context, both remote work, but also being responsible for coming up with a vaccine, and how social capital impacted and created collaborative overload during that incredibly pressured time at Johnson & Johnson. And then, of course, I couldn't not call a shout out to my friends at Workday, and particularly, Phil Wilburn, who talks about the social capital, how they were able to scale without sacrificing their culture. So the context of a tech company, life sciences company, I'll add one more other because it is one of my favorites, and I think it represents some of the most progressive work. Our friend Emerson Paz at Roche talks about how he delivered $500 million in value by building network principles and network practices into the way they go to market. In fact, their leadership team announced that they said, we want to be a network-based organization. And Emerson and 8 of his colleagues, 8 organizational architects, figured out how to do that by revealing, developing, and leveraging the network in different ways. So anyway, the diversity and I could let Kristin share some of her favorites as well, but the diversity of cases across these 9 domains: leadership effectiveness, workforce well-being, inclusion, knowledge management, and team systems. I found the context to be extraordinary.
I think these stories are great. Like I used to have a story about all of the glass blowers in Venice that were kicked off the island because their furnaces would actually, catch buildings on fire, and they were all moved to Murano, like island just like out in the bay. And you develop this like community of glass blowers. They got to like work with each other, and they like ate with each other, and they just like built up like very advanced sort of glass blowing, and they invented actually clear glass from these like social networks that they built with each other because they're experimenting, building all this sort of stuff that wouldn't happen if they were like scattered across, all of Italy. Famous data set if you want to get involved with no data. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point too, right? Like, well, kind of taking a step back, right? All these cases are great examples. They again give people like a different view, some inspiration, hopefully, about different ways you could potentially utilize network analysis. But like, I was thinking about it, one of the early learnings that I had when I first started getting into doing this kind of work within organizations was like starting with like the clear organizational challenge or problem or like issue that you're trying to address. And then figuring out, and usually it is, I would argue that there's often like a social capital element to most of the major challenges, right, that our organizations are trying to address, but like starting from there. And so I think that's also really important takeaway from this book, or from like the contributions of our authors, is that they're really clear about that from the beginning. Like, this is the issue we're trying to solve. We didn't just say, oh, hey, we want to do a network analysis project. We thought it was cool. We figured, hey, why not? We've got, we got some extra time on our hands. No, it's like there's like real reason. There's real issue that's motivating, the need to have these insights and take these actions. And so I think that's really important for this set of practice and analyses to be like more broadly adopted, within our field. So,
yeah, I would underline that and double explanation. Mike Benson, who looks after talent for GE Aerosystems and endorses the book, he said for a long time he was so enamored with network analysis, but he was a hammer in search of a nail.
Yeah,
and so he would be looking, and then when he realized it's begin with those outcomes, begin with the end in mind. What's the problem you're looking to solve? That was a complete unlock for him, and I think a great example of. I couldn't agree with Kristin more. I mean, thinking about what that outcome is. Is it to reduce collaboration overload, which is causing a well-being issue? Is it to ensure that spacewalks go well? Is it to accelerate a vaccine? Is it to scale a company without sacrificing its culture? Is it to, whatever those things look like, beginning and really grounding in that outcome, and being, there's so much, as our good friend and you all know him so well, Michael Arena, talks about, getting enamored by the arts and the charts. And we really want to sort of fight that wherever possible.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys are giving a bunch of shout outs, previous guest friends of the podcast, like Emerson, Michael, Rob Cross, and the like. I want to throw out a kind of a hypothetical to you guys. So imagine a hypothetical organization was merging 9 business units into one business unit. How could organizational network analysis help them in that kind of mergers and acquisitions type of environment to address those type of situations and what things might arise? Like how can O&A or SNA help?
So
Go ahead.
I'll start with one simple example and then let Kristin give the much smarter, more thoughtful answer. One of the, I think, biggest ideas, Cole, in all of this, or a really powerful idea, is this notion that there's a relatively small group of energizing influencers within organizations. And these folks have this disproportionate both reach and influence within the organization. And so if I was the without knowing all of the business context, one of the things I would think about from a social network science perspective is if I can identify what typically, and Scotty will correct me because he knows the actual answers on this, it generally ends up to be about 12 to 15% of an organization more or less can end up to be these energizing influencers. And Scotty's written a brilliant article on this as well. But if you could identify those people across those 9 organizations, they generally reach about 85% of the people within the organization. And so if you wanted to align around the business strategy or align around the organizational culture or align, whatever the value is, the fundamental value of an acquisition and a merger might look like, finding those 15% of people who you rarely know outside of a network analysis and activating them to share your message, to engage others, to have a pulse on what's happening in the organization, I believe could be a watershed moment in whatever that is, influencing culture, business strategy, launching a new technology. And so singularly, the idea of leveraging these energizing influencers you could be a hero within the context of that merger. And I think without using this technology, it would take you, it could take you forever. You might never achieve the objective of what the acquisition or the merger is trying to achieve from a business perspective.
Yeah. So I think certainly activating the network, like Greg's talking about, to be able to accelerate change is kind of the way I think about it in a merger and acquisition context, right? But then also thinking about like, okay, so you have a network you're starting when you're bringing these 8 different departments or divisions together, organizations together. And then it's like, is that the network that you need going forward? Right. I think is the other big question. Right. And are you seeing the changes that you would want to see in terms of how people are working with each other going forward? Or are they holding on to like legacy patterns of working that may have served them well once upon a time, but maybe aren't as productive? And that's like I think a tricky issue to maybe tackle, but you can see that in the network and you could think about how can you set up, I like talk about them as like facilitating conditions, right? Because it's really hard to prescribe to people like, this is your network. Now you're going to go and these are going to be your friends and these are going to be the people that you go to work with. You're like, no, I've built trusted relationships with people over time. I'm going to like naturally it's hard to prescribe and people don't like to be social engineered into telling them what their network should be. But if you can but you can do things to try to make it more likely that certain relationships will form or that whether that's introductions or it's just making, even like shared work or interdependent goals or like all these things we know about from all the research in terms of like what makes it more likely that people are going to build and maintain ties or cut or like, transition or cut ties. So you can be thinking about designing your workplace in a way that you need for that merger to be successful going forward as well. And there's actually some research too about the importance in terms of employees being successful and just how important those ties are that are those boundary spanning ties, right? So if you've got people that continue to work in their legacy silos, like they're probably not going to, particularly in certain roles that you might have for them, they're not going to be as successful. So you can pick up on all of those things with doing a network analysis that would help you provide like developmental feedback to folks in terms of how they can, shape their network to be more successful. So I would add that. I would start with what Greg said, but then I think you can follow the network over time too.
Cole, how satisfying is that answer?
Yeah, luckily it's only a hypothetical. It definitely wasn't one of my prior employers. I didn't talk to Kristin about it all.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about this before ever. No.
Y'all want to do some confusion matrix?
Yeah. Work through some confusion matrix. The confusion matrix.
Let's
you got
do
for
it. Okay, we're gonna do the return of the Waffle House. Who knows how much longer we're gonna
yeah.
be doing this podcast?
I'm so happy to hear this.
Yes. Okay, I got three. I'm like emptying the archives here. So anyone can chime in, but which is more terrifying? Water rising in a toilet that's clogged, or being trapped in an elevator?
Oh gosh.
Elevator for sure. Get me out.
Really?
Yeah. I can
I-
deal with a mess. We can deal with a mess later. That's fine.
I don't know. I've flooded some houses, so I'd go back to the elevator. I don't know.
Yeah. Like they could condemn a whole house if that gets bad enough.
Water is an evil. Yes,
Yeah. I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a good waffle one, Scott, for sure.
I've never actually been in a stuck elevator. I've definitely seen the clogged toilet though, and that's wild.
Yeah.
I don't know if anything's more terrifying in the moment than that.
I think if you're a homeowner, the toilet's probably more terrifying. If you're a renter, the elevator is definitely more terrifying.
Okay, what is more frustrating? A computer that freezes right before you're about to click an icon, or the phone that dies right before you send a text?
I'd have to go with the freezing computer.
Yeah. Like
smash that mouse like bang it on the desk. Like what the heck?
Yeah, I'm kind of at the point now where like if I never texted another human being again, I'd be fine with it. So I think the computer freezing would be definitely a little bit more terrifying.
Yeah. No, that's frustrating.
And that would usually happen to me about 30 seconds before I'm supposed to be on a live podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I find I get the fundamental system meltdown, your video is being used by something else, you cannot get onto that live. I've come into a lot of hot webinars, like really coming really hot.
Well, the phone feels like it's your own fault. Like you should know that your phone is dying, right? Like the computer just feels sort of random. All right, last one. What's more awkward, waving back at someone who's not waving at you, or calling someone the wrong name in a conversation? Perhaps somebody known for a while too. I do this more often than I should.
Yeah, the name thing that's my dad always taught me the most important thing you can do is remember someone's name. So I would have him in my head saying that was bad.
Yeah. I'm thinking the wave thing.
The wave is awful. The wave
is awful. Like if you want me to die on the inside, wave to somebody who doesn't wave back, and it's just so embarrassing. Calling somebody by the wrong name is like embarrassing, but I feel like you can recover from it. Like if it's somebody you've known a long time and you've called them the wrong name the whole time, that is pretty bad. But yeah,
at some point it's on them, right? Like that's just your name. You've been assigned that name.
I guess it's like Scott versus Scotty,
I don't know. Kristin, what do you think about that?
I live in fear of calling people the wrong name, particularly my students. Like, so I really don't want to do that.
Cole and I both know somebody who's an IO professor, and like I sat in on one of his undergrad classes one day, and he didn't even try. He'd be like, "Hey, blue backpack, what you think about that? Purple glasses. Hey, Nike shoes, give me an answer." I was like, "This is genius! Like, don't even try."
I worked for a guy, Phil Schwegler, many, many years ago, who would just call everyone professor. It was brilliant. He didn't. He'd walk down the hallway, professor, and it made people feel so. What didn't work at a university. This was at Merrill Lynch, but everyone sort of felt a little smarter. They're like, well, wow, Phil really thinks the world of me. Convinced Phil knew no one's name, and yet he came across as an absolute hero.
Yeah, that's like the politician quip of "It's good to see you." Because even if you don't know the person, it's still very nice.
It's still true, right?
Yeah.
I remember one thing about everybody. It's like I know one thing about you. That's all I'll ever know about you.
No, it's a great skill if you can pull it off. I have some colleagues that are just like, "Hey, buddy," like to everybody, like all in, or like, "Oh," like pal. I don't know. But it's like the professor, but they use that, and I'm just like, I just don't feel like I can pull this off. Like, yeah.
That's why I love Zoom. Everyone's name in the bottom of the screen. It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, do we have any more waffles, or are we gonna go into the
No
nerdery?
more waffles. Have y'all ever been to a Waffle House?
Yes.
Surely in Oxford, there's Waffle
Yeah,
House.
there's got to be a few.
There's got to be a
Just
million Waffle
got
Houses.
one like a year or two ago. It
Oh, a
hasn't been
new
here
Waffle
long.
House.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But I was thinking like, oh yeah, in Auburn, Alabama, definitely been to the Waffle House after football games. So that's
I
really
can
fun.
only imagine the Oxford Waffle House at 2 a.m. on a Saturday. Like that's got to be some. I've never seen drinking like I have when I went to see Texas play Ole Miss at Ole Miss, like 2012. That was insane. The Grove,
The Grove
the
is a
amount
good
of whiskey just in the air, just like smell it wafting.
Yeah, I'd say if you have not experienced the Grove, it's definitely something to do for sure.
Some people drink for fun. Some people drink as a way of life. You know.
Do you have any crazy stories, Kristen? Of, like undergrads walking in class, like little still
Well,
going?
I was gonna say, so I have not been to the Waffle House here, but I feel like that's a choice to not put myself in the situation where I may see my students
Oh,
and us
okay.
have an interaction that they don't wanna talk about later. So, like, there's definitely that dynamic of, like, there are just, like, some I'm happy do the Grove, happy to be or, like, love being downtown in our square, but usually not, like, Saturday night at 11 or 2 or whatever in the morning. So make some choices there.
That's when her alter ego comes out. Comes to play. But no, well, do you guys want to do some nerdery?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Awesome. The nerdery. Scott, do you have any of these? Yeah, where do you want to start? You tell me.
What do you go first? You go first.
Okay. So let me pull this up real quick. I've got narcissism at the CEO top management team interface,
Heck yeah.
measuring executive narcissism and testing its effects on top management team composition. So this is in the Journal of Management. I thought there was kind of a methodological play to this one, and then just an interesting part of it. I'll start with the methodological one, which is they assessed top management teams' levels of narcissism looking at their LinkedIn profiles, which I thought was super interesting. So they looked at the S&P 1500 corporations across a 5-year time frame and just assessed the CEO and their whole top management team's level of narcissism by looking at their LinkedIn profiles. But one of the things I guess they were suspecting to find, but didn't necessarily find, is they thought if the CEO themselves was a very narcissistic person, that would kind of create some more interpersonal negative dynamics. But one of the things that they found was that actually, if the CEO is more narcissistic, they're actually more likely to have more narcissistic like direct reports as well. And that didn't necessarily impact the top management team's performance negatively. But I thought this was interesting, and I'd be curious for you guys' perspective as semi-academic and academic. Like, is this a valid methodology either? But what did you guys think about this article?
Yeah, I think it's well, I was gonna say, I think the use of like alternative ways of measuring like personality, other kinds of individual attributes is really interesting. And there's other studies too. There's like a study that looks at NBA players and narcissism, and like I think they use like Twitter and that kind of or like and look at like basically their or X or whatever, but like their posts or their tweets. I don't know what do you call it if it's not a tweet anymore? Is it still a tweet?
It's a good
I don't know.
question.
I think it's still a tweet. Let's just say a
Okay.
tweet for the sake of argument.
Sure. Okay. And so they were able to look at, kind of that dynamics within the team that way of having like, narcissistic star kind of players and these kinds of things. And so I think these kinds of methodologies are really great and interesting to be able to allow us to answer some questions that we couldn't otherwise because you just can't get CEOs or NBA players to sit down and take your 50 item personalities or assessment or whatever.
It's like a behavioral footprint, right? Like you can
Yeah.
say you're not a narcissist, but we have all the proof in the world on LinkedIn.
Right. Yeah, and I didn't look closely, but I'm almost guarantee you that as long as the validation work is done, right, to establish that the measures that they're using, LinkedIn profiles correlate with our, established measures, which I'm sure they did,
Yep.
then I think it's great. Yeah, to do that.
Absolutely.
I would say too, it's interesting, or like now I'm just flashing back to my MBA class and talking about narcissism, which is one of our the fun topics to cover with a bunch of MBA students in a leadership and ethics class. But it's not so surprising to me they didn't find like the performance detriment, but it's like long term, right? Imagine that culture and the kind of potential other negative consequences. That's what I would say. It's like, okay, yes, maybe not the performance detriment here in this kind of snapshot, but over time, I don't know. I would not think you're going to have a good situation long term if you've got narcissism running rampant in your upper echelons of the organization.
I just imagine working there and everybody's like, I'm the best. And the other person's like, no, I'm the best. And it's like, actually, I am the best.
Well, is this like network homophily in action right here where, it's like you're attracted to other people that have like big egos?
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
Greg, any thoughts on this one?
My quick thought on it, I think go back to your earlier point is what I just love about it. It's the social capital element. It's the psychological safety. And to Chris's point, I'm a big fan of the Golden State Warriors, having lived in, California for quite a period of time. And at least when I think about those players, I'm probably sure I'm offending certain people, basketball fans, but I mean, the way that the psychological safety that they had with each other, at least, I think that really speaks. Having worked in investment banking, having worked for companies that I really admire from a social capital, having seen a high performance, I think there's a lot to think about there. It can really matter, that psychological safety of what people will lean into, or to Chris's point, it's the long-term effects is what I would be concerned about. Again, having worked in very diverse industries in very different parts of the United States, at least.
Absolutely. Have you all ever seen like a network graph of like, say, soccer passes, say like from player A to player B, that establishes a link, and they can run network analytics on those? It's really fascinating to like uncover their hidden strategies and like how to attack it. Like if one player is like very central, high page rank or something like that, like go put 2 men on him. Like you wreck their whole system.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, Scott, do you want to take us to the next one?
Sure. Do y'all remember Friendster, the online social network? Anybody?
I was never on it, but I do remember it.
I vaguely remember. I was never on it either. I was a MySpace guy, which is essentially like after Friendster. But this is an older article from 2013. Friendster collapsed in 2011, and probably should have been like the overall Facebook at the time. But these authors analyzed these online communities using K-core decomposition. That get you going, Kristin? You like a little K-core? They also developed a theoretical cost-benefit analysis of actually publishing this on these platforms, and found that having many connections, so like a high degree connection, didn't actually guarantee that the user be retained if their connections didn't themselves have many connections. So like essentially you're a big fish with very small disciples, I guess, or mixing my metaphors here or whatever. But they also identified that Friendster's collapse could be predicted by analyzing periods when new users joined and experienced insufficient cost-benefit ratios. So this is how I feel about X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, where you get all excited and you tweet, and then it just goes off in the ether. Nothing. Like, does anyone actually see it? Who knows?
No, they don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you're like
If
incredible.
a tree falls in the forest. I mean, I think that, Scotty, the thing that comes up for me in that context, and this was work that I had done with Deb Zahner back in the day, in looking at network analysis, we would find, at least for me, a shocking number of people who got no relational resources or relational benefits from the network at all. I mean, that just blew my mind, that we could see, I mean, pretty big, sometimes 5, 6, 7% of an organization saying, I get nothing from the people that I work with. And I thought, wow. I mean, how isolating, how, clearly these are folks who would be, at risk from a retention perspective. But I love, for me, I love this idea of and Kristin talks about it in the network leader diagnostic, the relational resources you get from people and being really clear about that and thinking about that also in the context of optimizing the relationships that you have, right? Can I get multiple relational resources from a similar group of people?
Some of the engagement models will have like, do you have a best friend at work as part of
Yeah.
it, right? Like capitalizing on the social capital, clearly.
Is there such a thing as like a network score for a curmudgeon? Like somebody who just doesn't want to talk to other people or something like that?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Not you got isolates that just don't,
Yeah.
but that actively avoid people.
Yeah. Like the hermit score, right? Like
Yeah.
somebody who are extreme introvert or something like that.
Yeah, gosh, now I'm trying to remember because, like, we look at, like, energizing, and so we see these folks that were, like, just completely de-energizing to everybody they interact with, and so you can see kind of those kind of signatures where you're just like, "Oh, wow, that's like, at some point, it's definitely about you. It's not about, the people, like, when they're the whole, like, "It's not you, it's me," it's like, "No, this is, like, definitely you," because like, everybody you're just de-energizing to everybody, but luckily, that's not very many people.
Well, graduate students out there, it sounds like there's a research opportunity to be had. Go have some fun.
Like, you ever seen What We Do in the Shadows, the show about the vampires?
I haven't watched it.
One of them is an energy vampire, and like his whole goal is just like to suck the energy out of everybody.
When we would actually we had a name for those and I have to credit Bass Geyer, who was the CIO, would refer to them as cheese suckers, Scotty. There was an actual
cheese.
they were stuck with cheese.
Wow.
They were so we actually did. We classified people as cheese suckers. They just suck the energy. With de-energizers seemed a little too geeky, so we referred to them as cheese suckers. They suck the chi, the positive karma out of the universe.
There's nothing worse than being at the office and being in a good mood, and like someone just walks in with a shitty attitude and just like kills everything, right? Like there's something as like being a good corporate citizen and come in the office, and at least you don't have to be in a great mood, but come on, man, you can't just like be the wet blanket on everything.
Yeah, I've been kind of a cheese sucker lately to Scott, so I'm sorry about that.
I call it the Cole effect. I don't know.
The Cole effect. Well, you want to hit us with the last one, Scott?
This is more random. The role of rejection, sensitivity, and relational victimization within the friendship group on conformity intentions. There's a lot to say. So essentially, the study identified 300 fourth and fifth graders, students as participants, and they've essentially found, like, go figure, that children who are anxious about rejection are more likely to conform to academic expectations and less likely to engage in troublemaking. However, children who expected rejection tended to resist conformity and did their own thing. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, do we want to keep people in line socially, or is like just being so free that you've been rejected so much you do whatever you want to do?
Yeah, I think that's like the inverse of saying somebody is independent, right?
Well, it's like, yeah. Boy, I can't even talk about it because like inside information. But yes, I've known people in the past, especially like elementary school, that like they were like the troublemakers. They're like, dude, you're gonna get in trouble. And they're like, yeah, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
Get in trouble anyway.
Like, yeah, like yeah, so what?
Yeah, whatever.
Like,
There's a really cool study of they gave we covered it a long time ago, about 2 years ago, where they gave it was a computer simulation, and they gave certain CEOs, the players, a golden parachute. So like no matter what, they were going to succeed, or they had time to explore. That's what it was. They had time to explore. And over the course of the game, if you had that time to explore, you had more profit at the end. You did better in the game. But it's really that freeing aspect of having the time to look around the environment and the freedom to do so that would really make the difference.
that actually brings up a point completely unrelated to fifth graders, but I've been thinking about lately, which is I think a lot of organizations are putting a huge pressure on their employees to like increase their productivity in the last few years.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's like a short-term versus long-term trade-off in that space where it's like, yeah, they're grinding. Like they're really going out and putting out the performance, but to your point, Scott, about the exploratory time, the bridging time, the like,
Yeah.
the, not short-term pain for long-term gain, but like short-term inefficiency for long-term benefit is probably being squeezed out of organizations right now too. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that from like a network perspective.
Like I want to know more about Kristin, like going online and venting about things. Like she's got to know some stuff about venting online and like having this time to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you made me think about that paper. So we just published a paper that looked at when you vent at work, which I'm sure we've all probably done once or twice, or know colleagues who vent to us. And this is that emotional expression of frustration, of anger, even when you face a setback or something. Like it can be about like any kind of problem you're facing at work, right?
Cold deals
And
with Scott. That's where the venting really kicks in.
and it's not too, so it's like, yeah, Cole's frustrated with Scott for showing up late, again and again, but it's not that he, takes it out on Scott. He goes and tells Greg about it, right? And can you believe this guy? And I'm so annoyed, right? But this like venting, this like emotional, like I just have to let off steam, or I'm gonna explode.
Of course.
I just like have to do this. That kind of like emotional outburst is people have increasingly been studying this, particularly in work, because we know we face all these hassles and it's commonplace for people to vent to others. And so what are the implications of that? And the research pretty resoundingly has been it's not good, right? If you vent to other people, now you're just like spewing negative emotion, and now you've ruined Greg's day, like you said. Like you kind of you brought things down. You're ruminating on your own frustrations, these kinds of things. You may even, or now that you vented to Greg, there's even some research to suggest he's going to go and like be more likely to be like abusive to others later in the day, and these kinds of things. So it's like there's this contagion effect, right?
Yeah.
And so the overarching recommendation has been like knock it off, like don't vent, hold it in, do something else with that. And even so much so that my colleagues found like a case, or a court case that I believe was in India, where like a company was like telling their workers they couldn't vent and punishing people for venting and stuff. And so it was kind of like, do you have this right to vent kind of question that was being like, litigated. But we wanted to ask a bit of a different question, right? Because we're like, but people do this all the time. There must be some kind of upside to this. What is it? And what's the impact, particularly for the people who are being vented to? And so taking a more like long-term relational kind of network perspective, we were looking at like, okay, so yeah, you might vent to people, but most of the research had just kind of looked at like this experience of like being vented to kind of one off, or the idea of like if you've got kind of just like you don't know who the venting's coming from, but like if anybody vented to you, how do you react later in the day? But we were like, no, like what about like I don't just vent to anyone, like I'm a little
Yeah.
in the workplace. I'm a little more choosy about who I'm going to like open up to, in a sense, right? And disclose my frustrations and my anger and that kind of thing. And so we looked at these what we call venting ties, but these established relationships where you repeatedly go to the same person. So you have these kind of preferred listeners within the workplace. And when you have these relationships, what are the relational outcomes of that? And we've basically studied employees over, I think we ended up with like a 8-9 month span over time, looked their network at 3 points in time, and basically found that over time, when you have these venting relationships, you also open up advice exchange pathways, basically. And so if you're venting to someone, that listener is going to be more likely to be able to provide advice. They know more about the challenges you're facing. They know more about you. You've developed, you've
Strong ties, right?
yeah,
Like repeated
basically
interactions.
you've basically deepened your relationship with them through this disclosure that you've engaged in during venting. And so it's going to create these advice pathways, which is important. We know advice exchange is incredibly important in the workplace. And so we're like, okay, great. There's some like these relational benefits to venting, this might explain why we keep doing it, right? Even though it's,
It's got to
you
have
know,
an evolutionary, purpose, right?
right. Like, even though in the moment it's maybe, has some negative short-term consequences and things. But I thought also one of the interesting findings that we had was that, like, this is great. So takeaway B is, like, it's good to be a preferred listener, develop these venting ties with some of your coworkers, but you can't be that preferred listener for everyone. So we found, though, that, like, if everybody's venting to you, then, like, you're actually less likely to provide advice to your colleagues over time. And so my former student, who is one of he he kind of was our discussions, and then happen chance identifying some other amazing co-authors who were also interested in the topic, like, but he was talking to me about being kind of the emotional trash can, around the office, and, like, that sometimes there are people who just everybody goes to share whatever they're upset or frustrated about, and, like, what are the implications for that poor person who becomes the emotional trash can. And so you don't want to do that either.
Yeah. They're the office scapegoat. We ritually sacrifice them once a year, and then we move on to a new one the next year.
There you go. Just
But
dump
damn, do they
all.
have good gossip.
Yeah, that's the other, yeah. That could also co-evolve the gossip, the network there too. So, but yeah, so it was fun project, some great insights, and it's coming out in personal psychology. It's actually available online now, but they're gonna have a special issue that's all about networks and networking.
Really?
So within, like, the field, just trying to put, again, more of an emphasis on, like, agency within networks. So, coming from more sociological roots within the network sciences, there's been so much a focus on structure. So this whole special issue is all about, like, people in their networks and the choices that they're making and how their individual characteristics shape their network development and, like, how they use their networks, basically. So it's
I
going to be
think
cool.
we're watching Kristen's H index go up before our eyes. So
Oh yeah.
well done, Kristen. You guys have been fantastic guests. Appreciate you so much. So excited about the book coming out and also your article as well, Kristen. But Scott, any parting words for the guests before we wrap up?
Greg, Kristen, it's great to see you. Like, the book is massive. Would you do it again if you had to?
I would do it again. I know Kristen is surprised to hear me say that, because for 5 years I was the venting person, but the opportunity to work with the 50 people we got a chance to work with, obviously I have a special place in my heart for working with Kristen, and I really do. I mean, it was amazing, Scotty, to see 50 people almost, I mean, rallied in the most. It was so uplifting to see 50 people getting really nothing for this, no compensation, just rallied for this good work, and they were just amazing. That really warmed my heart. So I would do it again.
I am surprised to hear you say that, 'cause there have been times where, like, no,
No, there were times. I get it, but
and I
yes.
have to, I had to be honest. I have told Greg once or twice that I'm very glad to have had this once in a lifetime experience with him, because it was a much bigger undertaking once in a lifetime than I ever anticipated it would be. But I'm, really proud of what we put together, and I hope it will have a really great impact. And so,
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
an
give it
incredible
time.
wealth of
Give it time.
information. Incredible.
Emphasis on the word once. And I've heard this is like Greg's big fish story where, it was 3 years in the beginning and then it became 4 years and now it's 5 years. And so,
That's right.
I mean, 2 years from now, it'll have been 7 years that the book is. So well done. But thank you guys again for joining us. And you've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott. And today's guests, Kristin Cullen-Lester and Greg Pryor. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.